Hello and welcome to Fadi's easy approach to project network. I know project network students sometimes find it challenging, and this is my approach where I use visual clues in order to do my calculation, and I find it an easier approach than other techniques. One of the first things you start with when you're doing project network is that you're presented with series of activities within that project, and then always try to familiarize yourself with what's going on because it makes it easier and less mechanical when you're doing your calculations. And this is a typical example. You'll have series of activities that are numbered A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and more. Sometimes they're numbered as in numbers 1, 2, 3, 4. This is a project where someone wants to design a product which involves at one stage presenting a prototype. So you can see defining the project, planning, analysis, design, develop a prototype, collect feedback, the final product, and then delivering and closing. The durations are listed, and this is in days. And you can see 2 days for defining, 2 days for planning, 4 days for analysis, and so on and so forth. It's a mistake sometimes that students make very quickly, because one of the first questions you get with project network is to tell us the total duration of the project. And what students do, they add up all these numbers, and in this case it's 44 days, and that is wrong. You do not add up these numbers. Why? As you can see on the right hand side, some activities are running in parallel, meaning they will run at the same time, and therefore they do not happen to be in sequence, and therefore the total is not going to be 44 days. In fact, it's definitely going to be less than 44 days. And this is where the last column comes in. Every activity will have some form of predecessor, except the first activity, which is defining the project, will be the first step, and therefore it won't have any activities before it. But if you look at planning and analysis, they can't start until you've defined the project, and that makes sense. That's why we need to know what comes before what. In the case of design, for instance, it can't start as soon as planning and analysis have completed. So you can see from this sequence already that planning and analysis can start as soon as we've defined the project, because yet sometimes we could do planning and be analyzing at the same time, but we can't do designing and design a solution until we have completed the planning and the analysis. And that's why it says activity D, design, will have to wait until the planning and analysis, activity B and C, are completed in order to start, and then it'll take 5 days to complete it. And always try to understand the case before you get started. The aim and purpose at the end of the day is to create a diagram that shows the network activity, sometimes called project network, to show the sequence of the events and to try to identify first the full duration, the real duration of the project, because there will be parallel activities, and also to try to identify what we call the critical path, meaning those activities that we can't delay them by even 1 day, because if we do, the whole project will be delayed, and usually we highlight them in red. And we're going to do it step by step today. So the first thing we need to understand is how do we draw each activity? And each activity is presented in a box. Now, some other approaches, they try to present them as a circle. Sometimes they write them on the line. I think the box is actually the most visually easy to remember and use. And so we're going to stick to that. So let's see what's involved in the box. The first thing is you may, and this is optional, write the activity description, whether defining, planning, analysis. You may want to write them there if you wish. But sometimes you don't need to. You just have to start working on the presentation of the box. You will show the duration of the activity. So whether it takes 2 days, 4 days, 10 days, you write them there. And you have to give an activity number. So A, B, C, D, the ones we just saw, or if it's numbered 1, 2, 3. Now we start listing things. And this is the bit where it becomes a little bit hard to imagine and understand, but visually it might get better when you see it in front of you. So the first thing you need to write on one end, and the top left-hand side of the box, is the earliest start, the earliest possible time to start this project. And for instance, the first activity is 0, that's day 0, for instance, but the next one has to wait for the first one to finish, in this case 2 days, and so on and so forth. We're going to see them in the example. The earliest finish, that comes during the calculations. We're going to see that. So if how it works. So this is the earliest possible time to finish the project, and it is 2 days. For instance, in the first activity, the finding will take 2 days, and therefore the starting point is 0. The earliest finish is 2 days. We're going to see that as well. Probably this is the one that gets a little bit tricky with students, the latest start and the latest finished. Again, we're going to see them how they work in the diagram, but this is probably one of the hardest thing with students, trying to visualize what's happening here. And I'm going to try to minimize the calculations, because that's probably one of the biggest headaches with students when they work with Project Network, is that many teachers and books, they present them in formulas and stuff, and it can become overwhelming. I'm one of those people who is more visual, and if I see what I have to do, it's a lot easier than seeing it in a formula. So maybe my technique will be an easier approach than some of the other techniques I've seen around. So let's see. So we're going to start. The first step in drawing your project network is to draw the sequence. So don't worry about the times, don't worry about anything, just try to find what comes before what. And the first activity we have is activity A. Activity A does not have anything before it, as you can see, so therefore it doesn't have anything coming before it. Then we go to activity B, and it says activity B is waiting for A to finish. So we have to put the arrow there to show that activity B will need to wait for activity A to finish before it can start. Let's look at activity C. What does activity C need? Again, activity C can start as soon as activity A is finished. So we add activity C and we put the arrow there. Now let's look at activity D. Activity D can start as soon as B and C together finish. Oh, okay, so we put the letter D and we say it has to wait for B and C to finish. The next one is activity E. Activity E needs D to finish to start. So this is a simple one arrow. We put it like this. Now we go to activity F, and activity F is a little bit odd. Activity F has to wait for D and E to finish. So look at the diagram there. We have D and we have E, and activity F will have to wait for both of them to finish to start. So we put activity F and we'll put the arrows like this. Finally, no, not finally, we still have activity G. G has to wait for activity F to finish, so we put it there. And then finally we have activity H, which has to wait for activity G to finish. And that's how we draw the sequence of our diagram. Shouldn't be very difficult, but be very careful. If you make a single mistake here, the whole calculation will be messed up. So you may want to have a quick check before you move to the next step. Step 2 is filling in the duration. You match the numbers that you saw in the earlier diagram. So we say activity 2 needs 2 days, activity B needs 2 days, and we just fill them in. So this is activity 2. And remember, we put the duration at the bottom of the box. So this is activity A needs 2 days, activity B needs 2 days, activity C needs 4 days, activity D needs 5 days, activity E needs 10 days, activity F only 4 days, activity G needs 14 days, and activity H needs 3 days. Again, you may want to have a quick check to make sure you put the right durations. Again, a mistake here will mess up your calculations. Now we're ready to do some calculation, and this is where I get to the visualization of the formula. So when we're doing forward calculation, we do this V calculation. Yeah, so we go from the earliest start to the earliest finish, and these are the top two corners we saw. Yeah, so it has this V shape, and always you add the numbers. Okay, if you have a choice, the bigger number always wins, and we're going to see them step by step. So this is how we visualize it. We're going forward, so that's from the left to the right. We go in V shapes. Yeah, we go in V shapes, and we add the number and we go for the biggest number. So let's see how that works. So we start with this one. Of course, the earliest possible time for this activity is 0. This is the first activity. We add 0 plus 2 in a V shape like this. Yeah, we do the V shape as shown in the diagram above, and we have the total is 2 days. Now, activity B and C cannot start until activity A finishes, which is day 2. And therefore, this is the time when they can start. So this is activity B and C can start on day 2. Again, we add the numbers. So 2 plus 2 becomes 4 for B, and 2 plus 4 becomes 6 for C. And then we add the numbers, as you can see there. So forward calculation, you follow what we call a V shape, yeah, and you add them. Now, here's where we get to the tricky bit, which is the bigger number wins. When we get to D, D has a choice between B and C to start, okay? But it cannot start until both of them finish. So it can't start until B and C finish. Now, B might finish in 4 days, but it can't start in day 4. The designing cannot start just because we finished I think it was analysis early, yeah? We have to wait for both activities. Sorry, it was planning. We can't start because planning finished. We have to wait until the analysis finish. So we have to wait for both activities, and therefore always the bigger number wins when we go doing the forward calculation. And this is where we get number 6. 6 plus 5 is 11. Now 11 is distributed in 2 directions. Again, the other numbers take them nicely. So this is 11 and 11. But we have to stop for a second. Why? Because F has 2 receiving messages coming in. So F is receiving from E and D. And we said we always have to go with the bigger number. So let's add the E. And when we add the E, 11 plus 10 is 21. So between 21 and 11, which one is a bigger number? The bigger number is going to be 21. So always we go with the bigger number. We have 2 inputs when we're doing forward. We go with the bigger numbers. We saw it in D, and now we saw it in F. Now, when we add 21 plus 4, we get 25. 25 gets passed to G. 25 plus 4 becomes 39. 39 is passed to H. 39 plus 3 is 42. And that's the duration of our project. Our project is not 44 days. In fact, our project is 42 days. Okay. And this is how simple it can be to do the forward path calculations for the project network. So try if you prefer the formula, go with the formula. But if you prefer the visualization that I use, that is a nice clue to keep. Now, the next step is what we call the backward calculation. Now, because forward we were doing the V, the backward is just a straight line arrow. It's maybe easier to remember. And this time we subtract. We don't add the numbers, so we subtract it against the duration. And where we have choice, we go always with the smaller number. So it's opposite really to what we did with the forward calculation. So when we did forward, we were adding and looking for the bigger number. When we're going backward, we're subtracting and going with the smaller number. And let's see how that works. So we start with the first thing. First, we move 42 from the top as the full duration to the bottom of the box. This is now we're ready to subtract. 42 minus 3 is going to give us 39. So that's expected. It gets transferred to G as the next possibility because it's not only one choice, 39. 39 minus 14 will give you 25. Again, it gets transferred to F, 25. 25 minus 4 is 21. Now, 21 is going to be transferred to both E and D, but here we have a problem. D is expecting 2 inputs. So there's 2 options. It has to go with the smaller number. So first we transfer it to E as 21. 21 minus 10 is 11. Now we have a choice, D, between 11 and 21. Which one is a smaller number? The smaller number is 11. So we pass 11. So this is where the smaller number is. And we pass 11 here. So we always, when we have a choice, we go with the smaller number. We're going to see it again in a second. So 11 minus 5 is 6. 6 gets transferred to B and C. 6 for get a minus 2 becomes 4, and 6 minus 4 becomes 2. Now here A has a choice. Okay, again we're going with the smaller number. A has a choice between 4 and 2. And we said we go with the smaller number. The smaller number is going to be 2. And 2 minus 2 is 0. And it's one of these checks you do here. If you have 0 and 0 as the backward calculation, then you know you did your calculation correctly. Okay, so when you have those 2 zeros, then you know you did your calculation correctly. Now we need to calculate the slack. The slack will help us know which activities are critical and we can't be late even 1 day in these activities, okay? If we're even late 1 day, the whole project will be delayed 1 day. And this is how we identify our critical path. So we start with the first one, 0 minus 0 is 0. We move to the next one, activity B, 4 minus 2 is 2. So we have a slack of 2 days there, whereas activity C, 2 minus 2 is 0. D, 6 minus 6 is 0. E, 11 minus 11 is 0. 21 minus 21 is 0. 25, 25, 0. 39, 39, 0. So we have lots of zeros, meaning this is a very tightly planned project with very little slack in there, very little space. If you're late, even one of these activities is going to delay the whole project. And this is how we start looking at the critical path. So the critical path is we highlight all the activities that have 0 slack. So activity A is 0 slack, activity C is 0 slack, D is 0 slack, E 0 slack, F, G, and H. And this becomes our critical path. Our critical path is A, C, D, E, F, G, H. That's how you say. Any delay on any of these activities will delay the whole project by 1 day. Now, the only task that we seem to have some slack, some space in there is activity B. And it has a space of only 2 days. So when we're planning this project, maybe we will consider that if we're a little bit behind in doing activity B, it will not necessarily delay the whole project. But if we're behind in any of the other activities, the whole project will be delayed. All right, so I hope my approach has helped you figure out a better way of doing it. So here's a summary of the sequence. First, you draw the sequence of diagrams. 2, you fill in the durations. 3, you do the forward path calculations, which you do the V shape, you add, and you always look for the biggest number. The output you're gonna get is the total duration of the project. Then you do the backward path calculation with the aim of reaching the first activity and looking that you have matched the zeros, which means you've done your calculations correctly. Then you calculate the slacks, which is the bottom number minus the upper number, and this you look to see where you get zeros. Where you get zeros, you can identify the critical path. And this is my technique and my approach to visually calculate project network. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you have any questions, do not hesitate to let me know.